Hello, today is March 16th. My name is Lee Folks. Who is actually running Donald Trump's Board of Peace? The Trumpster's peace plan refers to a national committee for the administration of the Gaza Strip post extermination. extermination. This video will name all of the men. There are no women on the board, by the way, on Donald Trump's Board of Peace, all of whom not only supported his Israel Iranian war, commenced on February 28th, but who also support the unfinished business of purging the Palestinians from their historic homeland of 5,000 years, begun by Joe Biden about 2.5 years ago. And Trump is just finishing the job, as he put it. It will name the New York City Zionist billionaires, none of whom had ever served in the U.S. military, who have gained complete control of the Trump administration's foreign policy, including the instigation of the U.S. Iranian war on February 28th. President Donald Trump took the existing United States Institute of Peace, which was completed in 2011 under the Barack Obama administration, and in December of 2025 officially renamed it just a few months ago, replacing the United States with his own name, proving once again to any doubters that he himself is paramount above the entire rest of the United States. It is now officially called the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, although he has been experiencing legal issues in his quest to remove the engravure of the United States from the facade of the building. And I will just show you a picture of that building here. Give me 1 minute to share my screen. Okay, let me make this big enough. Make sure you can see it okay there. All right, you can see here that it says the original name was just United States Institute of the Peace, but this is engraved into the stone, and he could not just simply erase it. He's trying to get rid of the name United States, and of course he put his name on top that he is paramount to the United States. That's the insinuation here. Okay, now I'll show you some other videos. I'm sorry, some pictures here. There's Trumpster Fire. I'm a paying member of Venice AI, and this is part of what I got. Trumpster Fire. And there's another version of it. If you wonder why his face got so orange, maybe it's the fire that affects the color of his face. And there's our modern day American crusader going back 1,000 years to the barbaric days of the Crusaders, the European Christians invading the Holy Land against the Arabian and West Asian Muslims. And why exactly he's got this t-shirt on, the toilet paper, I don't really know what he means by that. Is this supposed to be funny or what? And you can see the Shabbat cult that controls the Trump administration. They just got him to sign off on a piece of legislation. I don't know exactly what that was, but I'm sure it made them very happy. By the way, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is a member of this Shabbat cult. It's like a sect of Judaism. And I didn't know Donald Trump was Jewish, but apparently he's playing the game pretty well, doing what he has to do. There's his New York City billionaire friend, Howard Lutnick, who is currently the Commerce Secretary. And there's his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, doing the rites and the rituals at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. And if you want to know who really runs the country, it's her right here, Miriam Adelson. Her husband died a couple years ago, Sheldon Adelson. He used to own Trump, but now that he's passed away, part of her inheritance is that she now owns Trump, and she gave him $250 million to control his foreign policy. So that's a quid pro quo, and she currently controls his foreign policy. So if you happen to have $250 million laying around and you want to buy out the U.S. foreign policy, you might have to up the ante. You might have to give 300 million to if you want to purchase foreign policy. Then Trump will give you what you want in his transactional style. You pay him, he'll give you something for it. And by the way, they say there's a new MAGA. The MAGA stands for the MAGA stands for Miriam Adelson Governs America. And that's Trump's queen as he's putting the ribbon around her. All right, so let's go back to the reading. Trump held a meeting there on the 19th of February, 2026, just 9 days before he commenced his massive aerial bombardment of the vast country of Iran, including a triple tap strike on an elementary girls' school in Minab, near the southern coast of Iran, killing more than 130 girls aged 6 to 12, plus about 30 teachers and staff members. Double and triple tap strikes are done to ensure that any little girl survivors and the first responders arriving on the scene trying to rescue them are also killed. These have become a trademark of Trump's Secretary of War crimes, Pete Hegseth, which are a blatant and wanton violation of the post World War II Geneva Convention, of which the United States remains a signatory to this day. Trump said he began bombing Iran on the advice of four committed Zionists who have consistently put Israel's demand above those of the American people: Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Pete Hegseth, and Marco Rubio. Three of these men have no experience in the U.S. military. None of them are experienced military strategists. The boorish Hegseth has also ordered these double tap strikes on small fishing boats in the Caribbean Sea north of Venezuela because he suspects they may be carrying drugs, as they're being picked off as if the Zionist Christian Hegseth is playing a video game. Hegseth, employing his trademark taunting, juvenile, and belligerent bluster against Iranian leaders, has referred to them as rats and cowards who have all gone into hiding, when in reality the opposite is true, as Iran has refused Trump's request for a ceasefire on March 10th and is a country that is overwhelmingly willing to die on its feet rather than go supplicating on its knees to the Israeli Epstein empire. As usual, the opposite of what Hegseth said is actually true. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani openly joined a Quds Day parade on March 13th, despite Hegseth ordering 30,000 airstrikes all across Iran in the first 13 days of the war. Quds Day is an international annual pro-Palestine event held on the last Friday of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan to express support for the oppressed Palestinians and to oppose Israel and Zionism. It derives its name from the Arabic name for Jerusalem, Al-Quds. Sorry, my Arabic is not that great. The Quds Day parade was banned this year by the UK and Germany in deference to Zion. In addition, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the late supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, who was killed by Trump and Hegseth on February 28th, and actually Israel launched the first six missiles, as Trump suggested they do, to commence the war, and then the U.S. jumped in immediately after that. And the current supreme leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, served in combat in Iran and saw several of his fellow soldiers die in battle, so he is no coward. like Hegseth accused him of being. Hegseth probably didn't know. He was just shooting from the hip as normal. As a matter of fact, it was Donald Trump who was able to dodge the Vietnam War draft in 1965. Fred Trump, Donald's father, told one of his tenants in Queens, Dr. Larry Bronstein, that he would not raise his rent if he writes a letter saying that 19-year-old Donald had a bone spur in his foot. Done. Dr. Bronstein himself told this story many times before he died in 2007. Hegseth was a member of both the Minnesota and the New Jersey Army National Guards and is hardly respected by any of the military leaders of the four branches of the military. He served in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, a detention camp which held supposed terrorist Muslims from Iraq and Afghanistan, and which was infamous for torture of prisoners and holding them for decades without charges. Torturing handcuffed prisoners is hardly an act of bravery. Cruel and unusual punishment is explicitly banned by the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In recent years, Hegseth was a Fox News commentator who bloviates enough hot air to put the Goodyear blimp into orbit and who continues to give gung-ho, reckless, bad advice to his naive commander-in-chief all the while. American Israeli Miriam Adelson gave Trump a $250 million legalized bribe and, as a quid pro quo, demanded that Marco Rubio be his Secretary of State because she knows that she controls Rubio on a string. This gives a new meaning to MAGA. Miriam Adelson governs America. Rubio even said the first week of March that if Israel started the war, which Trump had encouraged them to do, then the U.S. would have no choice but to jump in immediately. This proves Rubio is not a leader, but rather a yes man follower of Israeli prescribed foreign policy. Donald Trump has placed all of us on notice that he and he alone can create peace in the United States. If you have any doubt about that, just look at all the peace he has propagated in Iran, Palestine, Venezuela, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Chicago, ad infinitum. In Trump's delusional, tripped out mind, he must be considered among the greatest peacemakers of all time, even surpassing the Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Be aware that our Lord and Savior and humble servant, Donald John Trump, is a devout believer in the Trinity, me, myself, and I. Trump is reputedly an atheist, but can you really be an atheist if you believe that you yourself are God? A bit of a paradox. He formed his Orwellian Board of Peace primarily to complete the ethnic cleansing of Palestine begun by his long-term partner, President Joseph Biden, who handed off the baton to Trump last year, so Trump could try to finish the genocide in order to eventually award lucrative contracts for the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip after all Palestinians are expunged from their homeland of more than 5,000 years. Trump has also intended that his Board of Peace would replace the United Nations, that he alone would control for life, regardless of whether he is president or not. As of today, 16th of March, only 2 of the 27 EU states have joined Trump's Board of Peace, Hungary and Bulgaria. We haven't seen a long line of other EU nations eager to join. He seems especially attracted to far-right austerity leaders who have dismal human rights records. No other EU member had accepted the Mafia Don's invitation to join the board. All right, now we'll talk about the people who funded Trump's Board of Peace. Just a few months ago, are now being bombed back into the Paleolithic era. The world's greatest con artist, Donald Trump, sold them on it, but all sales are final. No refunds. And now I'm going to show an open letter to Donald Trump from Caliph Ahmad al-Habtoor, a billionaire from the UAE, United Arab Emirates, which prior to February 28th qualified him to be one of Donald Trump's great friends. It is edited for brevity. Al-Habtoor wrote on X, and I'll show that so you can see it here. and I hope it's big enough. I'll make it a little bigger. All right. So on March 5th, he addresses Trump as Your Excellency President Donald Trump. His words, not mine. Most of the funding proposed in those border peace initiatives came from the countries of the region themselves and from Arab Gulf countries that contributed billions of dollars on the basis of supporting stability and development. And these countries have the right to ask today, where did this money go? And are we funding peace initiatives or funding a war that exposes us to danger? I think it's pretty clear by now that the war has begun and they have been exposed to danger. A direct question: who gave you the authority to drag our region into a war with Iran? And on what basis did you make this dangerous decision? Did you calculate the collateral damage before pulling the trigger? And did you consider that the first to suffer from this escalation will be the countries of the region? The peoples of this region have the right to ask as well. Was this your decision alone, or did it come as a result of pressure from Netanyahu and his government? You have placed the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Arab countries at the heart of a danger that they did not choose. More dangerous than that is that your decision does not threaten the peoples of the region alone, but also reaches the American people whom you promised peace and prosperity. And here they are today, finding themselves in a war funded from their money and taxes, with its cost ranging, according to the Institute for Policy Studies, between 40 to 65 billion dollars for direct military operations and potentially reaching 210 billion dollars, including economic impacts and indirect losses if it lasts 4 to 5 weeks, not to mention the sacrifice of Americans themselves. And by the way, so far already 13 Americans have died and at least 200 injured. You have even broken your promises not to get involved in wars and to focus only on America and put it at the top of your priorities. As you ordered foreign military interventions during your second term, that included 7 countries: Somalia, Iraq, Yemen, Nigeria, Syria, Iran, and Venezuela, in addition to naval operations in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. You directed more than 658 foreign airstrikes in your first year in office, which equals the total strikes in Biden's entire term, for which you directed your arrows of criticism at him for dragging the United States into foreign wars. If these initiatives were launched in the name of peace, then we have the right today to demand full transparency and clear accountability. Accepting Al Habdour's estimate of $210 billion for the gratuitous Iran war, that works out to about $3,182 for each American family of 5, which could have been better used for housing, healthcare, education, or car expenses. He also mentions 658 airstrikes in Trump's first year since 2025. Well, in the past 2 weeks, there have been thousands more airstrikes all over Iran. Actually, the number is over 30,000. So there have been more than 30,000 airstrikes in just the past 15 days. That's about 2,000 airstrikes per day, ongoing, including today, and there will be 2,000 more tomorrow. So that number has about quintupled by the demented man who was demanding the Nobel Peace Prize since last October. Haupt's number of 7 wars was actually an underestimate because the Trumpster fire also coordinated and ordered hits on Mexico in February and Ecuador in March 2026, just this month, not to mention the sanctions, blockades, and starvation of the Cuban people, who have been punished for 67 years for daring to exercise democracy and choose a socialist form of government. Trump also has in the buffer another war on Greenland, and who knows who's next after that, as the tiny worms squirming through and boring a convoluted path through his brain. If you glance at the map, geographically it appears that both Greenland and Alaska would more appropriately be a part of Canada than either the United States or any European country. But the megalomaniac Trump thinks the entire world should be under the dominion of either Washington, D.C., or of his Epstein billionaire class friends based in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. All right, there's our famous Trumpster fire picture again. Trump's Board of Peace will profit from the war and then the rebuilding after the war. What if some government offered to pay me $500,000 to destroy your house, bomb it, burn it down, and even kill people in the house if I felt like it? Then, after carrying out the dirty deed, the same government paid me another $500,000 to clean up the rubble and ashes and then rebuild your home. But now it's my house, and you are SOL. So I can sell it and make a big profit and then claim it's now a peaceful house. As perverse as this sounds, this is what Trump's Board of Peace proposed to do, but on a much grander scale. You may recall that in 2003, when President George Bush II, his Vice President Dick Cheney, and their clan of Israeli firsters lied about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction, never even defining exactly what these WMDs were, deluding people to imagine that they were nuclear weapons when Iraq had nothing of the sort. Their entire Air Force consisted of one plane stored in a hangar missing a wing. Technically, even an automatic machine gun used to mow down a first grade class in the United States could be classified as a weapon of mass destruction. But by failing to define it, the Cheney Bush team left people to imagine things that weren't true at all. The Bush Cheney administration deluded the American people so that Dick Cheney's Halliburton could first profit off of the destruction of the war itself by owning stock in the military industrial complex. Then, after a few 100,000 innocent Muslims were killed, they are always expendable, by the way, according to tacit Zionist Western war doctrine. Cheney's Halliburton would get even more contracts to rebuild Iraq after it was over, so he'd be double dipping at the expense of the American taxpayer. Of course, there are no real consequences for this endless warmongering. They could rinse and repeat and launch another one or two in every presidential term. So Trump's Board of Peace is created first to start wars and or one-sided mass slaughters, such as the recent ones in Palestine and Iran. And then after the empire employs its weapons of mass destruction, which are real, when the war ends, the same war profiteers can award themselves the contracts to profit still again from building back better what they have just destroyed. The Board of Peace will enable Alex Karp, Peter Thiel, and Palantir to build a test market surveillance state in Palestine, a model which they can later export to the USA to use on Americans who are protesting Trump's domestic or foreign policies. ICE agents in Minneapolis were taking pictures of people's faces to be sent to a database to criminalize just for simply being present at a protest. And that's Palantir's database, by the way. When ICE agent Jonathan Roth shot Renee Good in Minneapolis, he had a camera in one hand to take a picture of her face before he pumped a few rounds through her face as she attempted to flee in her car. More than 2 months after the incident, Ross was never charged with a crime. The Board of Peace can also be used to award contracts to Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or of Amazon or Microsoft so they can get some data centers, and also to the Mafia Don himself so he can get some more Trump towers that he fantasizes will pop up like mushrooms all around the world, further feeding the colossal ego of the world's most famous malignant narcissists. Trump's Board of Peace will also allow elite Western bankers from Davos, Switzerland, the City of London, New York City, and Israel to expand their worldwide financial empire, which will keep Americans and others around the world in perpetual debt bondage. The acronym MEGA on the red baseball caps was coined by the world's greatest con artist in 2015, but what it has really turned out to be is MIGA, M-I-G-A, Make Israel Great Again, especially the Epstein billionaire class, headquartered largely in the Mar-a-Lago, Florida area, where they could declare bankruptcy countless times and still never lose their $40 billion mansion due to Florida's draconian homestead exemption. To hell with working class Americans, the ones who really produce a country's wealth, but are unable to capture it. The first week in March, Donald Trump said that he welcomes the price of gas going up because we will get richer. He did not define who the we was, but it certainly does not mean the American people at large. It means he and his big oil stockholders, less than 10% of the American people. And by the way, please see my Substack at Lee Folks Substack. Origin of the Board of Peace. Donald Trump hatched his Board of Peace plan in September of 2025 in Davos, Switzerland, the headquarters of the World Economic Forum, which Trump pretended to be so against ever since 2015 when he first ran for president. The purpose of this conference was purportedly to create peace in Gaza. So if that intention was earnest, why were all Palestinians excluded from this committee? It was because Zion Don was intending that Palestine cease to exist any after the ethnic cleansing, and that it all be gentrified for his glorious billionaire friends and be fully annexed into the Zionist entity. He and Jared convinced it of being the next Dubai on the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Ironically, it seems that Trump did not foresee that in March this month, the billionaire's paradise of Dubai was in the process of being vaporized into the ozone layer by Iran. Over the past 2 decades, Dubai has become the World Trade Center of billionaire money laundering. Donald Trump personally has a Trump Tower in the two wealthiest Gulf, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, UAE and Saudi Arabia, which have not, at least not yet, been knocked over, but they have been evacuated. The executive board of Trump's Board of Peace would be headed up by Donald Trump personally, not in his current capacity as President of the United States, but by virtue of him having humbly appointed himself to a lifetime appointment, regardless of who may occupy the Oval Office in the future. The board's charter says that the Board of Peace can be dissolved at any time at the whim of Donald Trump and nobody but Donald Trump. Nothing like democracy in action. The other original members of his Zionist Executive Board of Peace include Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, and billionaire New Jersey, New York City real estate mogul; Steve Witkoff, his New Jersey golfing buddy and billionaire New York City real estate mogul; Marco Rubio, his current Secretary of State; and Tony Blair, former UK Prime Minister. Now remember, this is a boys' club only. No girls allowed. Doesn't look misogynistic at all, does it? Another executive board member is Robert Gabriel, policy advisor for Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. In January 2017, he joined Stephen Miller's staff as a special assistant. Miller is Trump's White House deputy chief of staff, and he has been in complete control of the fascist ICE agenda for all of Trump's second term. Gabriel later worked as an associate producer for the Laura Ingraham angle on Fox News from 27 onward, and became a speechwriter for Trump in January of 2021. In August 2022, it was reported that Gabriel had established an LLC, or limited liability company or corporation, that began receiving monthly payments from a PAC, Political Action Committee, associated with Trump. The next billionaire on the board is Israeli firster Mark Rowan, CEO of Apollo Global Management, an asset management firm. He has a net worth of about $10 billion, enough to qualify him to be on the board. Rowan co-founded Apollo in 1990 alongside Leon Black and Josh Harris, his former colleagues from Drexel Burnham Lambert, where he worked in the mergers and acquisitions department. Another of the Peace Board's members is World Bank President A.J. Banga, born in India, who later became a naturalized U.S. citizen. He formerly held executive positions for MasterCard, Citigroup Asia Pacific, Nestle, and PepsiCo. And so much of MAGA thought Trump was an anti-establishment maverick. Additional Zionist advisors to the Board of Peace appointed by Donald Trump. Josh Grunbaum is a New York City lawyer and senior presidential advisor in the Trump administration. He's used his position to cancel federal contracts with partners such as Columbia University in New York City for allowing students to exercise their right to free speech and criticize the Israeli Holocaust in Palestine since October of 2023. He has said that his Jewish upbringing and values shaped his worldview and political engagement. Arya Lightstone is an ordained Orthodox rabbi, diplomat, and author known for his significant role in U.S. Middle East relations, particularly in the development and implementation of the Abraham Accords, a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine made during Trump's first term, which was heavily tilted in favor of Israel. Lightstone was also instrumental in arranging Israel's first commercial flights to the UAE, Morocco, two of Israel's closest allies. In late 2025, he was appointed to Trump's White House Gaza task force alongside Trump's inner circle real estate acquisition specialists Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, posing as foreign diplomats who have little to no experience in foreign service. Lightstone was also offered a campaign chief position by Trump's boss, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but turned it down. The profiles appointed to the executive board are striking in that the private, financial, and political interests of its members appear closely intertwined with the objectives of reconstruction and investment in Gaza, raising questions about transparency and conflicts of interest. And I'll just take 1 minute out to show you the costs of this Iranian war, this unnecessary Iranian war. Make sure you can see that okay. I hope it's big enough. Uh, in the first 16 days of this war, it's already cost over $22 billion. You could say every second, it's going up about $15,000 every second. 22 billion so far of American money spent on this war, not to mention the immense destruction that's done to Iran and even the retaliatory destruction that Iran has brought upon Israel and UAE. UAE is probably Israel's closest ally, but actually all the Gulf states are, but Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and even Oman. All right, so the United Nations has 193 member states. Trump only got 26 of those to join his Board of Peace, which he hallucinates will replace the UN. That's only about 13% of the UN. That percentage seems to be about the same as his worldwide popularity, if even that. Probably a lot less than that. I'm guessing his worldwide popularity is probably 4 to 5%. And these are the 26 founding member states of Trump's Board of Peace. And you may have noticed that 5 of these countries have been stricken from the record because they're in the process of being leveled by Iran as their tit-for-tat response to Israel's mass carpet bombing of their country. These 5 Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC countries, are Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And all of these countries have allowed U.S. bases on their soil to be used to launch attacks against Iran from across the Arabian Gulf. It's known as the Persian Gulf, and Iran is known as the Arabian Gulf on the Arabian countries from their perspective. They have all been tucked away in the hip pocket of Israel for the past half century, but now this ironclad alliance appears to be cracking after being hit by thousands of Iranian missiles and drones, which they are no longer able to stop. Most of the U.S. bases have been damaged or destroyed. All these GCC countries were contrived with British-style monarchies after the conclusion of World War I, when Great Britain redrew the map of the entire Arabian Peninsula and installed their puppet government royal families. Meanwhile, Iran is also currently at work trying to wipe Israel off of the map. On Trump's list of 26 Board of Peace countries, it seems a bit peculiar that neither the United States, nor Russia, nor China, nor Iran are on the list, not to mention the other 163 UN member countries who want nothing to do with his charade. So this pending erasure will bring Trump's Board of Peace total down to 21 countries, less than 11% of the UN member states. Some of these GCC royal families have already fled their countries, maybe to seek refuge in the banker's paradise in Switzerland, or maybe to the Trump Epstein billionaire coven in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, where many of them have vacant $40 million mansions waiting for them, driving up the housing prices in South Florida, while Beta Floridians sleep in cars and highway rest areas so they can no longer afford to live there. By the way, I don't know if you ever saw this movie about, I think it came out in the late 90s. It's basically the Epstein class did this movie to, it's like they could not help talking about themselves. They could not help exposing themselves. It's a really great movie by Stanley Kubrick. It's called Eyes Wide Shut. It's starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. I would advise you to see that movie, Eyes Wide Shut. It was suppressed for about 20 years, so I didn't see it until just a few years ago. The Trumpster's peace plan refers to a national committee for the administration of the Gaza Strip. What a shocker that Palestine is not a founding member of the board, despite its original charter being explicitly tied to the reconstruction of Gaza. It is assumed that by the three New York City Jewish billionaires, Kushner, Windfall, and Howard Lutnick and Company, that all Palestinians will have been exterminated from Gaza by God's chosen people, which is equivalent to Trump's chosen people within just a few months. After all, in Trump's mind, the word God is interchangeable with Trump. All the world knows that humanity cannot be saved without Donald Trump. Let's all bow down and worship at his throne. Trump grew up in Queens, New York, looking westward across the East River at Manhattan, and staring him right in the face was that big, flat United Nations building sitting on the west bank of the East River. It seems Trump has nothing but contempt for that building, which was specifically intended to create world peace. So how many Palestinians are on Donald Trump's executive board? Well, that would be a big fat zero, or maybe closer to a double zero. Speaking of the number zero, that's how many African leaders are on the executive board of peace. Only three Latin American governments with far-right dictators made it onto the Trumpster's board: Argentina, El Salvador, and Paraguay. So that's zero Palestinians and zero African countries. Doesn't sound racist at all. To simplify it into a mathematical equation, it's zero plus zero equals zero. To better understand this complex mathematical equation, the great Billy Preston can explain it better than I can. And the link is in my Substack if you want to get that Billy Preston's song, Nothing from Nothing. Trump's executive board for Gaza. The population of the Gaza Strip has traditionally consisted of 100% Palestinians. By blood, they're about 98% Semitic. On the other hand, the Ashkenazi, or European Jews, are only about 25 to 30% Semitic if you were to conduct a DNA test on them, which interestingly is illegal in Israel, so they could not expose this fact. So there's nobody more anti-Semitic than people who conduct genocides on Palestinians, killing about 200,000 in the past 2.5 years. The Mafia Don also announced the creation of another body within the Board of Peace, the Executive Board for Gaza. How many Palestinians does this include? You guessed it. Another big fat zero. Nothing like democratic rule. Zion, once again, can puff out his chest and strut across the strip and demonstrate to the world how it is the greatest democracy in the Middle East. You would have never guessed that on this executive board sits another Jewish billionaire, the Israeli Cypriot property developer Yakir Dabai, a close associate of Jared Kushner. Kushner is from the Zionist stronghold of Livingston, New Jersey. Israel is now attempting to acquire and add Greek Cyprus to its Greater Israel project. At the Davos Forum, home of the Swiss banks that have traditionally run most of the world over the past 500 years, the U.S. President's son-in-law presented his master plan for Gaza. At that forum, regarding Abe's involvement, Kushner said he agreed to do it pro bono, really out of conviction, because this is just what he wants to do. He portrays the billionaire Abe as being so unselfish and altruistic, but in reality, you look at his investor portfolio, The conflict of interest is glaringly obvious. The Biden is looking to make billions of dollars more on rebuilding Gaza after the Palestinians are bulldozed off of their homeland of 5,000 years. A flashback eerily similar to the way the Jews were bulldozed into mass graves by the Germans during World War II. Has Donald Trump upstaged George Orwell? Has Orwellian now become Trump-Lovian? Referring to war as peace is Orwellian, or should we say Trump-Lovian? It may seem a bit of a paradox, but the verb pacify means to both kill and to make peaceful. Because as perverse as it may sound, of course, everyone who's dead is guaranteed to be peaceful because they're dead. This is the Trumpster's fire's evil, twisted idea of peace. Every time Trump starts a war, he publicly spews the opposite, that he stopped these same wars that he actually started. And his most recent escapade in Iran has an even greater chance of annihilating the entire Earth into Armageddon than even the Cuban Missile Crisis did back in 1962. If U.S. CENTCOM, Central Command, is defeated by Iran, do not be surprised if it will be folded into the state of Israel, which will acquire it for free due to the infinite generosity of the American people, unbeknownst to them, delivered on a silver platter by Donald Trump in his traveling Zionist show of real estate acquisition megagates, the greatest show on earth, featured New York City real estate Zionist billionaires Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff as his foreign emissaries. Update on the Israeli-Iranian war. In the first 2 weeks of Trump's incursion into Iran, which he referred to as an excursion, apparently not knowing the difference, that excursion means a fun vacation, which nobody in this war is in a position to take right now. Trump's elective war has prices of gasoline going up in the United States by about 10% per week and counting. But that's no problem for Trump because he said we are making a lot of money as a result of rapidly rising gas prices. While the we certainly does not mean the American people, it means he and his billionaire Zionist stockholder friends who own stock in the big oil companies who are seeing their profits spike upward with a sudden worldwide gasoline shortage since his reckless invasion of Iran began on February 28th. Polls have shown that 78 to 80% of Americans are against this war, but our votes don't count. What do you think this is? A democracy? American and Israeli deaths. U.S. Central Command admitted on March 14th that at least 13 Americans are dead and more than 200 injured, but that number may be grossly underestimated as it does not count all of the CIA personnel that have been killed in 7 or 8 different Arabian Gulf countries, which are never reported to the American people. We do know that several CIA stations have been hit by Iran in at least 2 of these countries, the UAE and Saudi Arabia at the very least. Iran had pleaded with these GCC countries for years to get the U.S. bases off of their sand, and since they were unable to, Iran is taking it upon itself to get rid of them. Since the war was commenced on February 28th, Israel has imposed an austere media blackout on anyone inside of Israel, with a 5-year prison term for anyone who simply takes 30 seconds to record a video with their phone for fear that it might be uploaded to any social media. CNN actually had footage, but they said live on air that they cannot show it because Israel will not permit them to. This makes it quite apparent who their boss is. This is so that the outside world will not know that in the first 2 weeks of the Israeli-Iranian war, Israel has already had a death toll at a minimum of hundreds of Israelis dead, thousands injured, and billions of dollars worth of infrastructure damaged or destroyed. How these deaths are broken down between military and civilians is being suppressed right now, but Zion cannot suppress these facts forever. Palestinians may now have a ray of hope after nearly 2.5 years of trying to escape their Holocaust. Iran is now setting conditions on who can pass through the Strait of Hormuz. After closing the Strait of Hormuz the second week of the war, on March 13th, Iran openly offered to permit any oil tanker through the strait with only one caveat, provided the transaction for that oil or other commodity on board the ship was being done in the Chinese yuan instead of the American dollar. That gives all stranded anchored ships northwest of the strait an opportunity to get on with their journey. Do you believe that Donald Trump is the greatest president in American history? Well, at the very least, he is unquestionably by far the USA's greatest Zionist president in American history. How much is this war costing Americans, taxpayers? I just showed you that ticket where it's already up to. I mean, I got to add another billion to this every day. Yesterday I had 21 billion, and you saw it just surpassed 22 billion. Okay, and within a few hours, it's going to be at 23 billion, which is about 1.4 billion per day and counting. The Democratic Republican Party duopoly, aka the Epstein billionaire class, which finances both major parties, could not give one hoot how much money the USA spends to benefit Israel, while the American working class is being economically pounded into the dirt as hard as the 20,000 U.S. airstrikes. Oh, I got to change that. I got to update this number. It's up to 30,000 now. These numbers are a few days old. 30 over 30,000 U.S. airstrikes that already been dropped and set on Iran over the first 16 days of Trump's elective war. According to the U.S. Constitution, only Congress can declare war, not the president. Yet the last time the U.S. Congress actually declared war was in 1942, when it declared war against three Axis-aligned nations, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania. So in every war since then, the USA has shown nothing but contempt for its own constitution. Yes, there are a handful of politicians in both political parties who oppose this war, but the overwhelming majority of both parties support the war, ignoring the will of 80% of the American public at large. So it seems both the executive and legislative branches of the U.S. government have nothing but contempt for its own people as well. All right, again, please see my Substack at Lee Folks, and thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.